Good morning again. I'm glad to be here with you all. So probably most people who stand up here and give a talk on Sunday morning would prefer that you look up here and you listen up here. Being me, I'm going to ask you to do something different. I'm going to ask you to look inside by, if you're willing, letting your eyes close, or if you'd rather not do that, let them gaze downward slightly. And simply notice what you're noticing. Since the eyes are off duty, maybe you are more aware of sounds or textures. Can you observe a sound without calling it good or bad? Can you feel a texture without deciding whether it's pleasant or unpleasant? Like where your clothing touches your arm or your leg. Is that sensation soft, stiff, fluid, rough? Is it smooth? And notice sounds now, including the sounds of your own breath. Are you being hospitable toward your own breath? Are you allowing it to enter the premises of your body without its having to go through customs? Do you make your breath go through any kind of gyrations or fill out forms or get vetted before you let it in? Or are you simply by being you, being hospitable towards your breath, welcoming it each time it wants to come in? And before you open your eyes, which I'll ask you to do in a moment, I want you to notice something else about the breath. It doesn't simply come in. It also goes out, like any good guest. It knows when it's time to leave. So if you'd like, you can listen to the rest of the talk with your eyes closed if you want, or if you'd like, you can let them open here. And just tune in to your own feelings about maybe you have had an experience of a guest in your house that it was time, they overstayed their welcome. How was that for you? Was it prickly inside or uncomfortable in some way? Did you grip your jaw or your tummy? Wanting to say something maybe, but not wanting to hurt the person's feelings? Like you might need to hold your tongue? Okay, get ready, because that is exactly what I'm going to ask you to do. Hold your tongue with your hands like this. I'm impressed. I'm impressed that some of you are willing to do this. Thank you. Okay. So notice that this tongue is just muscle. It's probably wet and thick, and you can put it back in your mouth now if you want. But notice any feelings that you might have had that might have flashed in and out, because we did that pretty quickly. But notice how you felt doing something silly like that, and how you might have felt if you'd been the only person in the room doing that. Okay, so if you didn't grab your tongue like this, let your eyes close again, because I want everyone to have tongue exercise today. Let your eyes close, if you're willing, or let them gaze down, and then no one is seeing you. I have my eyes closed also. And take your tongue out of your mouth. It's still attached. It can't run away. And so reach your tongue forward and take it up to the north and down to the south, and toward the east, and toward the west. And then let it come back in where we all know it belongs, inside the mouth cavity. And you can, again, well, let's not have you let your eyes open yet. Let's just say a moment of thank you for the tongue and all of the functions that it has served for you, and it will for the rest of the day. You'll get to talk during talkback. You'll get to taste during hospitality and for lunch and dinner. Notice if you could maybe say thank you to your tongue by letting it be wide and quiet. And notice if that might affect your jaw, your throat, even the back of your neck. When you allow your tongue to be soft. And maybe it's soft like this when we are truly being hospitable. And then if you'd like, you can let your eyes open again. When I sat down to write the talk, I just asked my higher power to write the talk, and this is what I've got so far, the tongue. There was some more funny stuff in it that I cut out, like customs, spelled C-U-S-S-T-O-M-S. But I realized that maybe the message was that how important the tongue is in our hospitality. Can you remember the sound of your grandma's voice or your grandpa's voice when you were little and they greeted you, especially if they hadn't seen you for a while? Remember how that was to hear, see, feel, how they used their tongue to be with you. There's a lot of power in the tongue. Maybe it's a gift. The word hospitality comes from a combination of two Greek words, merged to mean loving a stranger. Who do you welcome? How safe do you feel welcoming a stranger into your midst? What has to be true for you to truly feel welcoming? Who do you welcome so much that they actually feel a sense of belonging when they come into your office or your home, or when you let them into your heart or your mind? So when I don't think of myself as hospitable because I'm an introvert, and I'll talk to you one-on-one, but in a large group, it's like I don't beam. My husband goes into a large group and beams. It's his home. My home is all by myself or with like one person. And so I wasn't sure I could talk about hospitality, and then I realized, Jan, you could talk about being hospitable toward your own parts, including especially toward the parts of yourself that you'd rather be strangers. Feelings like fear or anger, or my most unpleasant one is helplessness. Somebody I love, I can't help sometimes. I don't want those feelings. I'd like them to stay away. I'm not hospitable toward them sometimes. So the next piece that I bumped into this week was a Unity magazine with a woman named, a psychologist and researcher named Dr. Melanie Dean. She's a PhD. Well, that was an example of sound. Huh? So for 10 years, she has been exploring all of the science she could find about feelings and how they are in the body, how they respond in the body. All right. So she learned from this research that emotions are like everything else in life. This, made up of matter, made up of elements, oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, etc. And each emotion has its own signature, its own identity. Anger is not the same as love, for instance. Two of the most famous molecules in the feeling realm are oxytocin and adrenaline. Oxytocin, well, most of us know, is what happens when we feel love. Adrenaline, we also know really well. It's the fight, flight. We know that. We even know the science of it, many of us. It makes sure that we have what we need to fight or flee or freeze. What was interesting to me is that because each molecule is made up of a slightly different combination of each of these elements, each molecule, each feeling, emotion molecule, has a different weight. For instance, when you feel fear, the body creates a molecule called orexin, O-R-E-X-I-N. Orexin weighs almost 3 times as much as a molecule of love, of oxytocin. I'll give you the numbers. Orexin weighs 2,899 grams per molecule if G stands for gram and MOL stands for molecule. And oxytocin weighs only 1,007. Isn't that fascinating? It's like science is saying what we already know. I was so thrilled. I wanted Deborah to hear this, and she's behind me listening. Okay, so Dean notes that this is too subtle. Your bathroom scale is not going to pick this up, but your awareness will. Yeah? You can measure this stuff with your awareness. So she suggests that, quote, fear feels sharper, heavier, and more burdensome than love. So you can just notice that in your own life. Next time you have one of those feelings, just notice how it is in your body. Not only is there a weight difference, there are other distinctions among these molecules. Each molecule of emotion spins, quote, 300 quadrillion waves per second of quantum energy. Somebody in the room knows what that means. I do not, except if the emotions are in there spinning like that. No wonder we are sometimes overwhelmed by emotions. They're spinning all the time. Gives me a good excuse for how I behave. So each emotion molecule has not just a different weight, but it has a different wave pattern, a different frequency, and a different spin angle beyond my understanding. So she writes, quote, emotions of care, hopefulness, gratitude, and love share similar smooth, calm, evenly spaced wave patterns that feel much the way they look. Conversely, emotions of frustration, anger, worry, and anxiety have sharp, jagged, chaotically spaced wave patterns that also feel much the way they look. I don't know about you, but I have had moments of feeling jagged. Yeah, it's a good word. All right. So then this just went on. I was just like, I read this in my kitchen. I jumped up and down several times when I was reading this article with this information in it. It's so interesting. And anyway. So the other piece is that when the waves are smooth and even, it's easier for my wave that's smooth and even to connect with your wave that's smooth and even. Then if I'm on the internet, let's say, I'm gonna make people's names up. If Matilda is on the internet, on Facebook, being feisty, jagged, distressed in some way, then she's emitting these emotion waves. And then Fred's over here, somewhere else in the world, also emitting jagged energy on Facebook. There's less probability because it's so erratic. The wave, they're not going to meet, they're not going to communicate as effectively at a feeling level as somebody who's in the smooth, even space. This should not come, this is not a surprise to anyone here. I know it isn't. Think of all the work you've done in the world and you bump into somebody jagged. There's the helpless feeling, bumping into somebody like that. And so we know this stuff, but I thought it was exciting that science now has discerned that they can measure it. Okay. All right, so my conclusion was that maybe it is okay that my husband spends time on Facebook looking and smiling and beaming at pictures of puppies. Because what might be happening in his insides? What kind of waves inside might he be creating looking at those puppies? You know, maybe it's not a big waste of time. Maybe it's contributing to world peace. Okay, so here's Dean's conclusion. Quote, scientists show that people with calm, purposeful, hopeful, and caring emotions produce smooth, even heart and brain waves that are 3 times more powerful and have 10 times higher frequency than someone feeling sharp, jagged fear and anxiety. Emotions of hope, love, and compassion are 3 times more powerful than those of fear. So, part of my practice is studying every Friday afternoon for an hour with a mindfulness meditation teacher whose suggestion is that I don't push away the jaggedness. I just let it be. I let it be. I'm hospitable toward it. I don't know that I get to hospitable, but if I could be in the room with it, if I could be in the room with it every time I meditate, maybe my waves will shift. It might take a long time, or it might not. But maybe I can shift by being hospitable toward those jagged things inside me. So we're going to, I'm going to suggest that I usually give people homework when I do purpose coaching. So I suggest, if you choose to accept, your mission this week is to just observe in your own feeling state, just observe what's happening and observe if you feel lighter, smoother, more even, how your voice changes, if it changes. Just observe that. That's your homework. And we're going to go in, I'm going to read from a meditation teacher who I haven't met, but my teacher quotes from this lady. And we're going to use it as our kind of our meditation time here. So Stephen, Stephen will help us with listening inside. And these words are from a teacher, an author named Sabine Selassie. And they are from a book called her book called You Belong. So if you would like, you can one more time close your eyes or let them gaze downward. When you gaze downward with eyes open or closed, it softens some of those small muscles that work very hard to hold your eyes up and to hold you in alertness when you need to be in alertness. So just gazing down gives a little oasis to those eye muscles. From Sabine Selassie. Do you believe it? Do you believe that you belong? Because you do. You belong everywhere. Yes, you, with all your history, anxiety, pain. Yes, everywhere, in every culture, community, circumstance, you belong in this body. You belong in this very moment. You belong in this breath and this one. You have always belonged. When you don't like the joke, you belong. When you're the only one of your race, disability, or sexuality, you belong. When you're terrified to speak in public, you belong. When you feel hurt, or when you have hurt someone else, you belong. When you are down to your last dollars and the rent is due, you belong. When you feel overwhelmed by the horrors of human beings, you belong. When you have a debilitating illness, you belong. When everyone else is getting married, you belong. When you don't know what you're doing with your life, you belong. When the world feels like it's falling apart, you belong. When you feel you don't belong, you belong. Let the music invite you to absorb anything that fits that you've heard in the last few minutes and release anything that doesn't. Bring your hands to prayer pose and bow your head to your heart and to all the parts of you, from smooth to jagged, all your parts, saying to them, you belong. And raise the chin and allow the eyes to open.